Welcome everyone to the second episode of Staying in Your Lane. I'm John Maley. I'm hosting with Triple T Transport. With us today are two very special guests. We've got Scott Oliver of HP Hood and Slate Kamp of Litehouse Foods, which is a salad dressing company, and HP Hood is a dairy company here in the United States. So I've asked these two gentlemen to join us, and we're going to talk about a specific subject for this one. The subject is going to be, what does it mean to be a shipper of choice? Scott, Slate, what would you like to talk about there?
Well, you know what, John, I'll jump off. I'll jump off the bridge first. I think being a shipper of choice is, I think we've recognized as a company, and I hope that we try to put our best foot forward, moving forward. With all the worldly events that are going on, that we have tried inside of our company to make sure that we become a shipper of choice by understanding that whether it's an asset-based carrier or it's a broker relationship, that every one of those drivers and every one of those trucks is an asset that we need to make sure that we treat them with as much professional courtesy as we can, and understand that they're probably as important, and maybe in this day and age more important than the bottling machines that we have and that we have to keep up and running. So that would be the first thing that I would say to you, is that we're starting to recognize that it's just not another truck. It's something we got to have, and we need to treat these people with respect, period.
I understand that. How about you, Slate?
I agree with all of that. Any of us who have spent any time on the road knows what it's like to be mistreated. If we're dispatching drivers or having drivers, conferences, or we interact with our drivers, we do see what they experience, or we hear about it, and we strive to be everything that where they've experienced this issue aren't. We don't want to be known as, in a Yelp rating as a 1-star. Now, we all experience the difficulties in our facilities for one reason or another, but if you want to be able to retain drivers, quality trucks, you have to have an environment that isn't one that operates, like I said earlier, as an organization that would mistreat these carrier organizations, independent operators, private fleets. It doesn't matter. They all need to be treated with respect. And Lighthouse has had a long-standing agreement internally that when trucks come in here with the expectation and an appointment to load, that it happens. So that's where I'm at on it. We try to make it a great experience. Obviously, not everyone is going to be, but we're never going to be that guy that has a truck sitting in the parking lot for 18 hours and we tell him every 2 hours, you're next. We won't be that guy.
Well, and I think both of you have fleets as well. Slate, how many trucks are you running?
We run 50. So, we have the makeup of our fleet is we have day cabs for territorial service work, and then we have all over the road equipment for hauling oils, and then we have our finished goods distribution, that with the biggest side of our fleet being here in Sandpoint, Idaho, that distributes throughout the 11 Western. And of course, then we have our small carrier fleets, we have our larger carriers, owner operators, and we have some broker services also.
And John, I would add that we're probably in the same ballpark from John, you'll know this term, the WF&B at HP Hood, which is what we call warehouse food and beverage.
Yep.
With our UHT plants and our culture, sour cream, cottage cheese plants. We run about, it's on the neighborhood, just north of 50 trucks. And a lot of that's, between interplant and things that we run. And then we also, we're kind of hubbed, one out of Philadelphia, one out of upstate New York going into the New England states. And we find that really the biggest reason we still have a fleet on the WF&B side is mostly because of we've got drop equipment we can load, and then servicing out of the greater Syracuse area and Philadelphia into the metro New York, New England area. that we can use our own equipment, load, preload, drop trailers, and get those drivers out. Plus, we're able to run doubles up and down the Route 90, across New York. So, we found that still, has its niche. On the other side, we still do have some fresh fluid milk out in the New England area. We have, fresh fluid milk plants. So we've got a lot of DSD trucks. That's probably more on the side of 200 with DSD routes going out servicing, milk to the small mom and pops, to food service locations and grocery stores.
You bring up a good point, because it seems like you guys are both running equipment and trying to keep drivers and hire drivers. Have you seen that be difficult in the past 2 years, especially?
Yeah, it's been extremely difficult to, keep the interest when there's, really, we're in the business of trading drivers. Litehouse, in our positions, or in the positions our facilities are in, is we like to appeal to the drivers that, live in that area, although we do have people that live out east or, not even remotely located to the plants, but they're interested in the job because it might get them through the house more often. We have a philosophy with Litehouse trucks that's really designed to not only service the customer, but to also facilitate our production plants with the things that they need on a reduced amount of time. So when I say that, we might run a truck to Seattle that has, 8 to 12 stops on it and, 3 to 6 pickups of Litehouse POs for ingredients or packaging, to get that back to the plant so we can make more finished goods. We strategically point those trucks in those PO-rich environments. So we're guaranteed that we'll get our production supply back, because the plant, while the customers are obviously important, the plant, you can't afford to have downtime because you don't have the resources in there that they've scheduled to run. That's how our philosophy works on that. The way our schedule works is usually every driver is in for obviously a minimum of 34 hours and, or 48. And we give them consistent routes, consistently serving their customers, consistent pickups, and then back. And drivers are allowed to change routes if they want. We shuffle them around, based on need or coverage. For the most part, the lanes that we run for the Litehouse fleet trucks are the same ones week in and week out.
And I guess on the HB Hood side, we're very, very close to that same thing. Again, one of the biggest reasons that we have the fleet, again, on the WF&B side, because the DSD is just, day after day after day after day, the same route, same drivers, right? But, our guys are going out and, again, taking care of that New York metro market into New England, coming back into the greater Syracuse area and or back into Philadelphia. And we also have, because we're hauling doubles, we've also been able to have, lucky enough that we have some strategic supplies that are in our wheelhouse. So instead of coming home empty, we're picking up. We've got a pretty good empty mile radius or ratio coming back in. So, we are also doing that same thing. We'd rather be in control of as many of those ingredients and packaging as we can, because then it's on us. If it's late, it's on us, right? Or if there's an issue, it's on us, as opposed to, whether it's a broker or an asset based, if something happens and they can't pick up and we're right on that 11th hour of, we need the product or we're going to get shut down and can't run production. Obviously, that's one of the biggest things from our operation. John, this, we're 24/7, basically 365 days a year. And, we can't afford to run out of anything. And so you talked about, is it tough to find drivers? The answer is yes. And you said, Slate, that, you're trading drivers. So a lot of big money going out to people for signing bonuses. People are really looking at, what does that freight look like? How often do they get home? What's their schedule really going to look like? And I think part of this conversation at some point today is, in Slate, you amaze me when you go out and you say you're sending out 5, 6, 7, 8 stops on a truck and then making pickups on the way home. That's got to be a difficult thing to do in this day and age over the last 2 years. But that, that's one of the things that there is so much single stop freight out there. And Slate, I don't know enough about your company to know where you're located and what the hot markets are. But, doing business with John and Triple T, every one of our plants are in a hot market. So
Yeah, I was going to say, everything's a hot market. It's a hot war from the get-go. And, you're right. The stops are not something a lot of guys want to do. They talk about more cycles of, pick one up, drop one up, pick one up, and they like that. So we have to, and I'll share this information with you guys. We spent months in 2021 evaluating our fleet driver pay. And we just actually rolled it out here a week or so ago. And it's designed to not only keep your drivers, and we have drivers that, have been here over 20 years. And, when we hire a driver, we want him or her to stay. That's the point. We provide a consistent scheduling system that they can rely on for their income and their home time, trying to find that balance. For Litehouse, we're an organization that believes heavily in continuous improvement. And that's not only for the plants, that's for the people that operate them. And I feel like with our last driver pay schedule, that it was probably the best work that my team, including my transportation controller, my fleet manager, we had assistants, even as high as the executive team, who was, adding suggestions and, being creative. That's really what it's all about in terms of retention and attraction without, overpaying the marketplace, because that's a possibility. And we've all seen that too. Drivers get promised that you're going to, I've lost drivers this way, I'm sure you have too. Drivers get promised that they're going to make whatever crazy number a year. And, if you're lucky, they call back in a couple of weeks and say, I might have made a mistake here because these things, these promises didn't, come to fruition. And, I'm looking to get my job back. Now, that hasn't happened a lot here, but it has happened.
Yeah. Slade, it's interesting though, you mentioned and you said that you want to retain drivers. You're probably in the same position that we're in is, we've got a lot of tenured drivers that have been here 20, 25, 30 years. What do you do when they retire? And regardless of the pay scale, and John, you probably know this even better than we do with all the people that you deal with, is where are the next drivers going to come from? Regardless of pay, regardless of you promise them home time or you promise them a good work environment, do we have the younger workforce coming up that really ever want to drive a truck in this technological wave that we're in, where people can, have jobs with computers and that kind of thing? Where are those drivers going to come from?
I believe pretty strongly that in the supply chain, that there should be an outlet or government resource for funding to train drivers or to put people, driver candidates, if they desire to be in this industry, that they should have some type of outlet where they can be trained and they can stay and they can be supported while they're going through this, because it's a process. And normally it requires you leaving home. Now, whether they, come back from this type of training, because nobody is, there's no organization in our government that I know of that is trying to develop that. But I think that pool is, I think the possibility of that driver pool increasing through government programs is a very real possibility. And we're just not providing that training. It's not happening. And we're also not holding, there's other things. We can promise our drivers and our carriers that they're going to get as close to the best treatment as possible when they're in a Lighthouse facility. But when they're going to, a customer, we really don't know how they're going to be treated. And there needs to be something in place to make sure that these drivers have what they need when they get there. Adequate facilities. They need to make sure that their appointments are honored. Maybe even places to park overnight. Now, that might not be possible because land space is limited, but these are all things that I think of out there that aren't helping us recruit into the industry right now.
I would agree with it.
And I think a great point.
Well, I owe Scott an answer to his question, and I want to answer your question, but we're going to stop and we're going to take a trivia question here because it's actually perfect timing for the question. And the question is here, guys. What is the average driver's age in today's market? A, 44, B, 48 years old, C, 52 years old, or D, none of the above?
48.
And I was going to go 52.
All right. I'm going to tell you the answer is D.
Okay.
As of November of 2021, the median age over-the-road truck driver is 46. But the median age of a private fleet driver is 57. Okay? Both of which are well older than the average of 42 years old in overall employment comparison.
Interesting.
That's huge.
So when you look at the average person working nowadays is 42 years old. That's the average. So in a couple years, I'll be there. Right, guys?
Yeah,
you guys
nice
have,
try, John.
have
Yeah.
a few?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the statement that makes is there are some different dynamics there because over-the-road driver is what we're focusing on. We're not focusing on city drivers, straight truck drivers. We're not looking and polling all numbers with CDLs. We're actually looking at the guys that will come and leave your state and go 5 states away or 10 states away to get to where you need them to go. So last year, the driver fleet and pool of drivers in the country over the road, but the whole number, not just over the road, went down 1%, which doesn't sound like a huge number.
It is.
It is because it's really not 1% of over the road drivers. So you're going to, in that number, you're going to take out guys that were driving over the road and went to regional or local driving opportunities to be home more, because all of a sudden that's now paying a lot more too. So holding the cash out doesn't make people want to do it.
So, John, what I hear you saying potentially is, FedEx, UPS, the Amazon, all the stuff that's now being delivered directly to your house. These guys that are driving small vehicles that don't have to have CDL requirements, as the workforce gets older, is that an easier job than what they're doing today? Hustling a tractor trailer and or a straight truck, and they can go make the same amount of money and be home at night.
Correct. That's number one. Now, the staggering number was the e-commerce number. 300% increase last year. And it's stayed so steady that it's considered a permanent shift. It's not coming back. Brick and mortar stores are not going to come back to compete with that. So as of now, they're taking the driver pool because they have the revenue to do it.
Yeah.
Again, that takes away from over-the-road equipment or over-the-road drivers. Now, Slate, to your point, and Scott, you may back me up on this or you may not. I don't know that there's a lot that our government programs do really well. If there's a government program that you think that our government does a great job at, I would be willing to listen. And I don't necessarily want them in charge of training drivers. I like the idea, though. I think there should be some type of grant or funding that we can all pay tax dollars to support it. And I think you bring up a great point, Slate. when I was a young kid, I lived across the street from a high school. And this would have been in the late 70s, early 80s. And I would ride my bike back there all the time, right? You'd meet your friends, you'd go play ball, you'd go to the pool, you'd go wherever. But I would go behind the high school and they had a body shop. And they had a mechanic shop, all part of the high school. Now, there's nothing. You're going to school, you're not learning home ec, you're not learning life skills. And home economics, I remember, because they still had that when I went to school. The first thing they taught you was how to balance a checkbook in home economics. And they taught you not to go to the grocery store hungry because you'll spend too much money. And you learned how to make eggs, brownies, and you learned to cook and do some things for yourself independently. And that was a normal part of the school process. Did you guys have home ec in school?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So if we could get somewhere in our industry where unfortunately, I know that so many of the kids come out of school with dreams of going to college. And that may be an easier path or it may not. So I think we're seeing the trades come back strong. I think we're seeing truck driving jobs are going to come back strong. The latest data I saw was we're going to be the shortage of drivers is going to be twice as bad by 2024 or 2026. Twice the number we're short now. If we're looking at this objectively and we say, hey, we used to be able to take it and work on sharpening a pencil and being smart. Now we have to say, I think that's run its course. I think everyone knows that it's run its course, but you still have resistance to change, resistance to understanding what's going on outside your four walls in the industry. So, what does being a shipper of choice mean? Is it unloading and loading trucks in 2 hours? Or is it actually not basing your business commitments on only price? Because everyone gets price from their upper echelon to drive out costs, to save money. But Slate, you're telling me it sounds like you gave your private fleet an increase.
We did.
And was it well received?
It was. Again, I thought it was one of the it was phenomenal work by the team to develop it, organization overall, and then to get it implemented, it was great. And I think that the feedback that I've gotten from the drivers has all been very positive. And I can go into it a little bit, and it drags in some old school stuff, but just for clarification's sake on government, on my comment about government programs, I don't necessarily think the government should teach it, but I think that the ability to have seed money for farm club or bench is where I'm going with that. We all know that there's a critical gap between training in school and going to work for some fleets. There are big carriers out there that will do the training and put you to work immediately. But there's a lot of carriers that are restricted to, a mandatory 1-year experience. So it goes with the development, the induction, and then, of course, the growth for to bolster the supply chain with, critical needs such as drivers. And then working environment, comes along with that, as I commented on.
Well, and I think that what we're seeing now over the past 2 years is we've seen a shift from the big asset-based carriers losing drivers to smaller private carriers. And that is happening. That is real. The 5-digit sign-on bonuses are real.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got somebody with a clean MVR that you would trust and you would like to hire and that's accountable and on time and presentable and all of the things that we want for a driver to be in an ideal world, they're going to be able, in today's market and moving forward, they're going to be able to pick and choose who they're going to work for.
Absolutely. And we all want them to pick us.
That's
and we
right.
have to have an environment that's attractive to them and fits their needs in terms of family and downtime, et cetera. And of course, some growth potential there also.
Well, and back to that, I believe that everyone likes to be appreciated. Everyone who's out there working and doing the job needs to know that they're appreciated. That's the number one part of retention, more than the money. It's that they're appreciated and someone cares about them and someone thinks about them, because it's a lonely job out on the road. I think that's the biggest value, but I don't think we treat the drivers that way, and I don't necessarily know that the industry is capable of changing the model and image that we have to get to where we're not short. Scott, you have children,
I do. Yes, sir.
and Slate, you have boys too, don't you?
I do.
Anybody send their children to truck driving school?
Um, I taught two of them, but only one has a CDL.
Okay, and does he use it?
He does.
Good.
Yeah, he does.
So I think that makes a statement, because I don't see a drive pushing towards the driver pool scenario. I don't see a solution coming from a program, to your point, Slate. I think there should be seed money. I think we should have to pass something. We should be in a position where we know we're going to need this even more so in the future. Why not make it happen and train and teach and do this the right way, so that they can live a good life and have the career, and maybe not choose to go to school if they don't really want to go to school.
Well, John, to kind of, go back, I agree with everything you just said. And whether it's government or whether it's trade schools, and someone figures out how to like send somebody to school, but they actually have a job and getting paid somehow while they're training. And then then they can go choose who they want to go work for. The company that they go work for maybe, has to, chip in some dollars to maybe pay for that training that they had if they recruited that driver. I think all that kind of stuff is really, good ideas. But again, I think when you talk about driver retention and how we treat people is, whether it's Litehouse or whether it's Hood, we have to make sure that we're treating people with respect, right? But I think the other end, I think there's a great miss on the other end of making those deliveries and saying, when you get there, you should be upheld for your appointment. I'm sure, Slade, you're in the same position we're in. You get behind on production, something happens, you get 8, 10, 12 hours behind, and you got trucks sitting in your parking lot and drivers are upset. You have to know how to air traffic control what's going on in your own building to make sure you get everybody out as quickly, as fairly that you can. But on the other end, you get there and you're on time for your appointment, and they tell you they're in slot lock, or they tell you that they have a COVID issue and the warehouse doesn't have employees to unload you. Come back tomorrow. And now you got a layover situation. You got detention. Guys wanting to get home. They missed their next pickup. John, we've talked about that a million times, right? Guys that are working for you, they missed their next pickup and they missed that revenue. All those kind of things. Those are the things that I think through that supply chain, I have an obligation to get the guy in and out. And if something happens, I need to treat him fairly. We need to talk about detention. We need to be fair and equitable. But then when they leave, you can't just get somewhere and say, you're half an hour late for your appointment. We'll see you tomorrow. There's got to be a way to get better things going on at the end of the delivery schedule that doesn't also monopolize time and money and just think, hey, you're late. Come see me tomorrow because I'm the most important customer you have. And you're going to play by my rules. All those new OTIF scores and all the kind of stuff that they want to tap you with. That is also an industry problem.
Oh yeah. There's no question about that. The revenue stream, that yield from fines and penalties. I personally, don't think that we should have or be subject to any fining policies at all. If we're required to make an appointment and we make it, you unload us. If we make it and you don't, that's on you. This is the way it should be. anything that anything after you especially on a stops load, any costs associated with you not honoring the appointment should roll back to that customer. But we all know that that is going to be extremely difficult between what would be a manufacturer, shipper, customer, DC. There's got to be a way to overcome it. But the fining policy itself, it isn't really helping anybody. And I think that it also pushes decisions that shouldn't be in the hands of the driver in terms of safety. If the driver knows the organization is going to get $1,000 fine for being, 8 minutes late, and he or she is pushing at a few more miles an hour, or, running a yellow light, that is not the message that we want to send.
No, but I think unfortunately every production facility that I've run into and done business with over the years, I've never yet run into one that hasn't had production problems, hasn't had lines go down, hasn't had equipment failures. I mean, I think that's common. I think the big thing is separating yourself from it. Now, what's tolerated in the industry, because it's not in our control, is the gray area that we're talking about. Once you get the driver out of your facility, if you're late getting him out of there, and you compensate him fairly, and you give him an "I'm sorry," and we'll do it better the next time, and you do what you can do and should do to make the situation as right as you can make it, because there is no way to make it perfect.
No.
You can't make up time.
When you run into challenges with cooperation in the supply chain, that really determines how successful you'll be. You're living on the edge every time.
Yes.
And I think that for Litehouse, this is real. Over the course of the pandemic, with customers that maintenance buy, it's been a little more difficult to supply them from week to week, because it takes longer to get anything, from anywhere. We've all experienced that. Then, you get up against, a fill rate requirement, and that causes, issues similar to fining policies. They have the same components. I'm sure that HP is subject to that, just as any other manufacturer is. And those are hard things, to overcome. It's like you do all this prep work for the distribution, and then you have to go out and execute. And by far and away, the hardest part in that process is for the driver to do that job with all of the little idiosyncrasies that could happen to him out there that could prohibit him from being successful.
Well, in Slate, I'm assuming you're in the same boat that a lot of manufacturers are, and I think because of that, there's a lot of pressure on a lot of manufacturers to keep up. Simply just
I can't get into the numbers too much on turnover rate inside the manufacturing plants, but over the last 2 years, we've experienced some some pretty incredible numbers in turnover. We saw a rebound in 2021. Our HR department did a phenomenal job. Our leadership team did a great job with, trying to maintain the employee owner base, longer than just, start here and disappear a few days later, or maybe 6 months. But, that in itself has been a real challenge, in terms of order fill. For Litehouse in the transportation side, and so, sometimes I forget we're a manufacturer that has a transportation fleet. Obviously, we all have our jobs, and we're all super dependent on the other departments to ensure that we're all successful. And we see our best numbers always appear on anything above a 97% fill rate. So to your point earlier about we haven't seen our sales fall, but we saw our productivity fall. We saw our fill rate fall. Fill rates being off 30% might mean that you're sending, numerous light trucks out on your distribution schedules that, of course, are cost builders for operating that fleet, and that's factor two. It's just a really, really tough industry to be in, and you constantly need everything to go as right as it possibly can to be successful.
I think I would agree with that. Guys, it's time for another trivia question. Slate, you might have the inside track to this on Scott.
I've never been good at trivia.
Well, this one might be up your alley. How many hours can a single driver drive before he or she must take a 30-minute break?
It's isn't it 6?
Well, A is 6, B is 8, C is 11, and D is 14.
It's 6.
6. I got to go with 6 also.
It's actually 8.
Hey, you need to cut this out of the recording. This
Yeah, no kidding.
The two fleet guys don't know squat
Hey,
about
I
DOT.
can't help it that you guys aren't professionals.
Hey, wait a minute now. I'm going to probably have to blame that on my fleet manager for not letting me drive the trucks anymore.
Well, I think that may have been a smart move.
It might
on
have
his
been.
part.
I have a CDL, but I rarely see the road anymore.
So,
Me too.
do you have a CDL, Scott?
Yes, I do.
You do? I don't. I would love to have one. I want to try and, give you guys the time you need, but I do have another question for you because this is important. And for us, we're talking about shippers understanding what the meaning of shipper choice is, okay? And for me, I think initially, and when the term came out, shipper choice, it used to be getting trucks in and out in a timely manner, right?
Yes.
I think that's where it started. And now it's a deeper question and a deeper dive because after we've been through, I think that what I would say is so far the worst of what the last couple of years has had to share with us and from all of our perspectives in the industry. We went through a very, very loose market at the beginning, COVID hitting, and then it was a steady current that came about 3 months after. It was like an undercurrent, and the market started to tighten everywhere slowly, like a boa constrictor squeezing, and rates just started to climb. And and everyone, we all fought and tried to understand. What I get it, but I don't understand what's really driving it. And I think the capacity issue on top of the e-commerce demand, all of it created its own little perfect storm where in 2017 we had an ELD mandate and 4 major hurricanes absolutely ruin the stability in our market.
Yeah.
Then 19 came and shippers said, we're going to get that money back. And they went and squeezed on the carrier base to get their money back. And then in 2020, we started to see the effect of COVID and the capacity crunch. And the carriers said, we got to make money because there's not enough of us. How, as a partner, how do you quit riding the yo-yos together? How do you say, hey, look, anything's going to work and you'll think your plan is successful when the market is loose? How do you do that and squeeze it and say you want to be a shipper of choice? Because now I get phone calls from everybody saying we want to be a shipper of choice, where in 2019 nobody wanted to be a shipper of choice. Everybody has some skin in this game. Shippers, carriers, brokers, everybody involved in it has some skin in this game. And how do we get to the point that we say, hey, you know what? When the market's tight, the people that take care of us are going to be the people that we take care of when the market loosens? Is that being a shipper of choice? Or how do we get to a point where we can actually exercise some stability with our carriers? The carriers don't like to have to go haul for a different person than they hauled for the past year or two.
Right.
John, I think I think it's an easy answer. It's just I don't know how doable it is or how quickly, we can all collectively change. I still think it is being a shipper of choice is knowing when and how to communicate that you're having a problem so that a dispatcher can reroute a truck and send it somewhere else so that driver can make his revenue or that asset gets used. But when that truck gets to one of our facilities, we should get them in and out in 2 hours. And we should have communication with that man that says, hey, listen, you're here, it's going to be 2 hours or 3 hours, or it's not going to be, you should have been here 3 days ago and we're not going to load you until, 5 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours from now. I think we have to come up with a way to have internal systems that we know what product's available, when it's going to be available. And when we're scheduling that truck in there, that we're going to have product available and we're going to get them in and out, right? Slade, you and I talked earlier that we said, hey, we went somewhere and we had a customer that we made an on-time delivery, but they raised their hand and say, well, we're in slot lock, or we didn't have enough people come to work today, or we overbooked our appointments, come back tomorrow. Well, we can be upset with our customer that they didn't communicate to us, but we also have that we have to do something up front, that we have better tools to be able to manage the workflow coming in and get that truck in and out in that 2 hour window, because there's government regulations and there's ELDs and there's hours of service regulations. So, it starts with us, but then it finishes with going to that customer or that final destination, and people get you unloaded and get you in and out without just saying, well, you're late, come back tomorrow.
I think that you're right. And, and mitigating any delays that are possible out there are probably one of the strongest pieces of, being a shipper of choice. So if you drill down into that, you have with the obvious, a couple hours in, a couple hours out, you want to be able to supply the driver with, timely loading or timely unloading. You want to be able to pay him in a cycle that works with his financial obligations. You want to be able to keep him in cycle. Like when we send a carrier to another plant, we want to do everything we can to get on the load on them, to get them to complete a circuit back or to another plant. We like to keep them in that. We don't really like losing them for months at a time, or even up to a year. But again, there's also the post-departure attention that is required. You have to remember that if a driver leaves here, whether he's a fleet driver, owner operator, a small carrier, and he's got multiple stops and he encounters issues, that he's going to have support from home base, because that's one of the biggest factors. Because you can almost bet you're going to have some trouble. And it's really out of his hands. Now he or she is the go-between of the customer and the shipper, and that's not the most enviable place to be. And when they need help, they need somebody to be there on the other end of the line to support that. I think it's very important.
I would agree with that. I think, for us, the approach is, we're staffed 24/7, 365. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, every holiday we're staffed. You may have to wait at times because sometimes all the problems do happen at once, but not normally very long. And I think what we do especially well is, if we have to put the driver on hold, or the carrier on hold, or the dispatcher for the carrier on hold, or the owner's mad because of what's going on and he's taking the call and it's 2 a.m, it's, hey, we're going to get a solution. May take a few minutes, but we got you. And you have to handle it that way to separate yourselves. Because the old days when you got by, I think a lot of people have gotten by lying to drivers, and that's done. You're going to be on blast on all web posts. Your facility is going to be on blast. That I don't think anybody can afford that in today's today's world with the technology that the drivers are using and have, and the social networking sites, and then the Yelps of the world.
Right.
You're going to get burned, and you're going to do it to yourself, unfortunately. But I think understanding what it is to be a shipper of choice, I see it from the driver perspective. I think in every scenario, the driver is the extension of your organization. When we pick up for you, Slate, our driver is going to be an extension of Litehouse. When we pick up for you, Scott, our driver is going to be an extension of HP.
Absolutely.
Are there bad drivers? Absolutely. Are we going to have one do something? Absolutely. Are there bad brokers? Absolutely. Are there bad shippers? Absolutely. So we have to focus on how we separate in these scenarios.
Continue watching on the next episode of the Stay in Your Lane podcast.